Yeah, I mean, those are all vastly very different schools. I think the hardest thing I've ever gone through, which was the best thing I'd ever gone through, was going from one school, starting off at great athletes to the next, not having very many good athletes, and then playing a bunch of teams that had tons of athletes. Um, you get exposed really quickly, and it's the worst feeling you can ever have because you've done great the last 3 years as an OC. You think you've got it figured out, which by the way, if you're a good coach, you realize every single year that you know less and less and less, and you're willing to admit that. But um, I mean, I was I wasn't cocky, but I was like, oh, I got this thing figured out pretty quickly. I'm 2 years into it. I think I got it. And I transitioned to, the next school and great kids, uh, not tons of athletes, but we're playing, Cibolo Steel, Converse Judson, Smithson Valley. I mean, they've got a few 5 stars,
Guys are about to get drafted,
100,
like in a couple weeks.
100%. And it exposes you really quickly. But I think you have to go through those experiences, especially as a young OC, in order to learn. And that was the hardest thing for me, is to sit there on the sideline and not have an answer. And I just remember at that time saying, I never want to have this feeling ever again.
So what was the answer? You're in that situation Friday night, in game, understanding that
Yeah,
I personally am ill prepared for a multitude of reasons.
yeah,
What's the approach post game, rest of the season, rest of your career moving forward?
I mean, you feel guilty, or at least I did initially, because you feel like you're doing the kids a disservice. And I just felt like it was totally my fault. I mean, and I've always kind of looked at things that way, you know what I mean? But it's want to be a people pleaser and give everybody the best you can. But I felt like it was my fault. And it's the middle of the season, so you can't change your entire offense. I'm a big believer in, yeah, you want to adapt, but if you do that in the middle of the season, your kids are going to, like, kids see more than what we think, and they're going to see that like, whoa, hold on, why did you just change everything? Is it because what you initially had didn't work, and now they lose that confidence and faith in you? Same time, you can't keep doing the definition of insanity. And so
Same thing over and over,
yeah.
expecting different results.
So you've got to be smart about, okay, what can we tweak within our offense, right? So we can still put our kids in the best success. And so that's where, for me, I've always used the same quote. It's where Coach Ilfer and I always talked about it. We will have Home Depot as an offense. We have aisle 1 through 25. Now, we may only use for one season 1 through 15. The next season is 1 through 22. The next is 1 through 5. But you have to have 1 through 25 in order to have that arsenal, and so you can have those answers.
I agree. You got to, for me, especially in a place like this, speaking of my vast coordinator knowledge, but foundation is so important. And, a lot of people talk about the growth of a team being that week 1 to week 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes a little bit farther than that, maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe a little bit into 4. But you're going from trusting that you've built a solid foundation to identifying exactly who you're going to be within the foundation. What is our best scheme? What is our best approach? What puts our guys in the best position to be successful without having to go back and reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's, one thing we didn't talk about last time was, I think the best thing that came from COVID, from a coaching staff perspective at Lipscomb Academy, was we had to break up into pods. So, 10 kids or less. That was the best thing that we could have done, because what we didn't want to do when you have those, many groups, is you don't want to have one group that's here and the next group is here from a learning perspective, because you're going to group the guys A, B, C. It's just natural. But you don't want A to go here, they keep growing, and then C, they're not really growing too much, because now when you get to, whether it's season or you're doing that in the spring, there's a huge gap, and you don't want that. So we just said, screw it. Let's just teach football. Like, not the plays, nothing. What does smash mean, right? What is a zone scheme versus a gap scheme? And what that allowed us to do is, in the middle of the season, we could make those adjustments, and the kids understood why, because they knew football. And so coming back to a coordinator, my biggest advice to any coordinator would be, know what you're doing and don't have it memorized, but know it. Listened to a podcast with Joe Rogan the other day, and they were talking about how memorization is the worst thing you can have, like with our phones. People can sit there and memorize it, show up the next day for an interview or a conversation, and sound like the smartest person in the world. But when you try to ask them to, dumb it down per se, they can't do it. And basically, it came down to if you can't explain whatever you're trying to teach easily, like in layman's terms, simple, you don't know it.